Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness, and Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan, my awesome co-host. And today I have a very special guest. Linden Schaffer is a wellness travel expert, founder of the first U.S. wellness tour operator, Pravassa, and creator of the virtual retreat series, Wander Home. As a best-selling author, Linden's work has been featured in the New York Times, Fast Company, and Bloomberg TV. Please welcome Linden. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hi, Dr. Alice, and hi, Donovan. Thank you. I'm so honored that you have me as a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, of course. It's great to have you here. So yeah, let's dive in. And why don't we start by telling us about your story and what led you to being a wellness travel expert?
Yeah, well, it's this long journey, which I'm sure a lot of us, right, when we end up starting companies a little later in life where we found our passion and we're able to make sort of our passion our business. We look back and we think, oh, what was the first time, right? These things sort of showed up in my life. And so Pravassa, which is the travel company that I started in 2009, the seeds of that go back to when I was young. I was always obsessed with travel. And it was probably, I grew up in the Midwest, and it was a pretty small town. People looked very similar. And so I had always dreamed of what is life like outside of this little place. And so whether that was traveling through National Geographic magazines or a globe that I got as a gift when I was a young kid, right? That's kind of what started it all for me. I moved at 18 to New York City, which is where I was ready to conquer the world. And I had a career in the fashion industry before I started my business. And as much as I love the fashion industry, part of what I did throughout my career there was try to find jobs that would let me travel. So it was, how do I, make money, have a stable career, but then do that thing that I love. And was able to successfully do that, traveled Europe, traveled the US, a little bit in Asia. And in 2008, it was kind of a colliding of all these different things that were happening at the same time. I'm sure you remember the financial collapse in 2008. And I was working in retail, in wholesale and retail in a luxury segment of the marketplace. So we were definitely hit with all of that. I also got married, and my husband is from Argentina, and we planned a destination wedding in Argentina, but we did it with a twist where it was a 4-day celebration, very much not about the wedding and much more about Argentina and the culture and the reason that we love to go there all the time, and really involving our friends and family in that whole experience. And then people having such a great experience. And when I decided, I've kind of done what I needed to do in the fashion world, I was ready to start my own business. I wanted to continue to travel. And I thought, how do I combine all the things that I love, which is this concept of health and wellness and how I'd been living my life, as well as traveling the world. And so I sort of came up with this idea, and I pitched it to a friend of, hey, I would love to take people on the road and introduce them to health and wellness around the world, and use that as the foundation for exploration in other countries. But it also has that doubling effect of the things that you learn and the ways that you feel, you bring home with you and can implement them in your life. So it's kind of that gift that keeps on giving. And so that's how I came up with the idea for the company. And not having run a business before, I pitched this idea to a friend. They hired me on the spot to plan a trip. And I thought, well, I have a company and now I get to do something I love. And so it was just really setting aside that fear and taking the leap into my passion in creating a business.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. And you can tell, based on the way you laid it out, that it's something that's been growing over time to take over more and more of a percentage of your time. I had a question around kind of, when I was looking at your background and whatnot, there's this wellness piece. So I'd be curious how you've kind of integrated those two things together and what the story is to kind of connect those pieces, because a lot of people want to travel or try to travel as much as they can, but I haven't heard as much on this wellness side.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a great question because we're realizing as a society, and I know you guys talk a lot about this on the podcast, of the mental, emotional, spiritual health, right? That is, it makes us a whole person, right? When we address all of those things. And I think in our country and society specifically, the physical fitness piece has been there, but the fitness of all these other areas is now we're paying attention to them. And so that's when you look at wellness and you look at holistic health as a whole being, how do you apply that to different areas? And for me, travel for me was an obvious one because I always felt when I traveled, it was easy to let go of habits. It was easy to let go of boundaries. It was easy to let go of, how we think sometimes and be a little more open-minded. So it's like, how do we implement these things when we're in a space that leads us, right, to these feelings and then this way of being where you can kind of break your walls down a little bit. And for me, being a curious person and being always ready to explore somewhere, it seemed like a natural fit. And so when I launched the company in 2008, there was no wellness tourism. There was no concept of this within the travel space. So I definitely helped to pioneer that part of the industry and have been working with people ever since. And you mentioned, I believe in my bio, I wrote a book called Living Well on the Road. And it's because people started to ask me, like, how do these mesh together, right? And how like when you talk about health and wellness, which is such a broad category, what does it look like? So whether that's mindfulness and meditation, whether it's community, whether it's being out in nature, right? A lot of times when people travel, they get so excited to go to a place. And as we should, right? We're experiencing something new, we get vacation, right? All of those kind of happy feelings. But a lot of times people travel to a place and you can miss the complete essence of the place without kind of grounding into whether it's the society, whether it's what's happening around you, whether it's the beauty of a space, because you're trying to like check things off your list, right? If you've ever been somewhere that has very famous things, you could be running here and there. I'll never forget one of the times when I was in Paris and everyone that I was with wanted to go to the Louvre, but they were closing soon. So we literally had 45 minutes and we ran through the whole place to like see the 5 amazing things, right? But can I tell you anything else about that Louvre experience? Not at all. So when it comes to traveling with health and wellness in mind, it's really about slowing down. It's really about being intentional. And it's really about getting more out of an experience. And so this type of travel, it's a mindset, right? And so that means also it looks different for everybody. And there's tons of practical things we can talk about on how to do this for yourself. But for some people who are really into, let's say, meditation, what my company and I suggest is if that's something that keeps you grounded and keeps you focused, start every day of your vacation doing that. Because what it's going to do, it's going to ground you into the space that you're in. It's going to keep you focused in the part of the world that you're in. It's going to connect you more readily to the people and the places that you're visiting. And like one small little change like that can make such a huge difference in your experience.
Absolutely. I could see that. And I could see how going about traveling with the expectation I got to hit all these markers can kind of be contradictory towards, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on what your goals are out of the trip and the travel. Because for me, I am a huge travel advocate myself. I've been to a lot of places in a lot of countries, and I can only travel with certain types of people because my parents growing up, they were the ones to be like, we got to get everything possible, squeeze as much in, cram-packed calendar. And I'm like, I don't feel relaxed. I don't like this. So my style, my preferred, and thankfully my fiance has a similar style of like, okay, mainly I want to go to just relax and do nothing because I'm always the person who's always doing all the time. So I need to do nothing, but maybe like one big activity of the day, like scuba diving or something like that. Do you find like different people needing different things when it comes to like traveling for their well-being? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, because there's a spectrum, right? When we talk about health and wellness, and you can be someone on one end of the spectrum who says, I'm going to go to like a health resort where they only feed me certain types of food, where I don't have to make any decisions. The decisions are made for me, right? That's one extreme. And then you have the other extreme. Maybe you're traveling with family and everyone has different goals. And so you can't do one complete itinerary or one complete idea, because when you have multiple people, right, everyone wants something different. So you have to find a way to balance that. But all of these things can be rooted in this concept of health and wellness. And so, whether it's an individual or whether it's a family, Dr. Alice, you mentioned you are going to go camping this weekend. Maybe that's something like this idea of being in nature, that everyone, if you're traveling, let's say with a family group, everyone has that as a touch point, right? Of yes, nature can mean different things, but everyone agrees like time in nature is going to be something amazing. And so the way that we have worked with clients in the past when we're planning travel for them is to focus on that thing, right? What is one thing that they can all come together on that will touch on this concept of health and well-being, and that will show them the place that they're in? Because, let's say you're in Japan and you nature is your thing. So we'll take you through the bamboo gardens there, right? Or maybe you're in India and culture and community, which is super strong in India, is how you relate and like to address health and well-being. So we can get you invited into people's homes, right? So there's different ways to address all of this, because health and well-being, I mentioned, we're talking emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, right? There's so many different ways to address this that you have to kind of step back and say, what nourishes me? How do I want to feel, right? You never want to have a vacation and come home feeling like you need a vacation from that vacation, right? because that's sort of the antithesis of the concept of relaxing and rejuvenating. And when it comes to traveling, I think a lot of us have this mindset of we have such a limited time, so we do need to see everything. But in the end, if you look back at some of your favorite vacations, a lot of what you did, that running around, is either a negative memory now, or you can't even remember what you did because you did so many things. And so if you think about it like in that mindset and say, we're going for 7 days, let's plan 5 things that we want to do. And the rest of the time, let's leave it open. Because more times than not, those magical moments and those things that you remember can also come in that free time.
Yeah, that really maps onto kind of my experience, especially over time. When I was younger, vacations were few and far between. So there was very much this pressure of, we have to get the most out of our vacation, which would a lot of the times, like you were saying, end up getting home and being like, wow, I'm more tired than when I left. And also don't remember a lot of the stuff. And I've found, over time, as I have aged and gotten more autonomy over the way that vacations go, really spreading things out and having some space. And I haven't thought about it this way before, but it was really nice that you mentioned kind of being more intentional about what I want to get out of vacationing. And I think I've done that a little bit naturally, but I can definitely see that as I've done more of that quality of my experience and my overall well-being, again, going back to whether or not I come back feeling refreshed or just drained, has a lot to do with picking some of those things beforehand. And it may or may not be related to how busy it is, but it is mapped to making sure the activities that I've picked out are the ones that I will enjoy. For example, spending some time in nature, as opposed to, the most popular thing to do in this place is this. Sounds terrible, but it's the most popular thing, so I'll go try it. And it really, sometimes it's worth to just go see, just to see what it is. But it really resonated with me when you mentioned kind of being more intentional about what we're trying to get out of a vacation.
Absolutely. And there's, some tangible examples. And one of the examples that I love to give, because it's such a contrast. And what's fascinating to me is my clients haven't experienced this contrast, but I have, because that's the whole point of running this travel company and planning experiences for people, is I go and I make the mistake, right? And so therefore, when you work with me, you don't have to, I've made the mistakes for you. And so one of the examples I love to talk about was a trip to India that I did. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And I don't know if either of you been there, but I'm sure that you know it's super crowded, right? There is personal space and India is not always available. And the Taj Mahal, right? One of the wonders of the world, and it's on everyone's bucket list. It's something that they want to do. And so my challenge is, how do we take people to this amazing thing that is on everybody's list, that gets super crowded, but make it a pleasant experience? And so the first time I went like anyone else, showed up, walked in, had the experience, which was great. There were so many things that were amazing about it, but it also, the energy, right? It's very chaotic. There's a lot of people rushing in. As a foreigner, the Taj is a pilgrimage site and is very significant to a lot of people for religious reasons and other reasons. So you get domestic people from India all, traveling for weeks, sometimes months, if they're on pilgrimages to get here. Some of them have never seen foreigners before. And so that also is something that you have to recognize in terms of people are going to stop you. They're going to want to take your picture, right? All of those things, which is a fascinating experience unto itself. And so the question I had to ask myself is, if I'm bringing clients back here and I know what the experience is like, how can we do it in a way that's more intentional? How can we do it in a way that people's energy is kind of level and they're prepared to handle all of those things? And so what we did from that point forward, whenever we brought clients, is we work with a company there that was able to find us a private space outside of the grounds of the Taj. And it's this beautiful grassy hill, and the hill overlooks the Taj. So what we do with all of our clients, depending on how many people we're with, or whether it's private or however it's set up, either we have the clients go there first, let's say they're by themselves, and literally just take off your shoes and walk on the grass and look at the Taj and like take that in, right, as a visual meditation, as this beautiful, wonderful thing. And it gives you a second to be quiet. We've also done it with groups where we're there and we take a meditation instructor with us, and we sit and we look over the Taj. And again, we do a group meditation together. So whether you're by yourself and just kind of walking around, or whether you're with somebody who's led you in a guided meditation, what it does is, again, it grounds you into the environment that you're in, and it gives you an appreciation from a distance, and it lets you stop and take a breath. From there, you go visit the Taj. And, it's kind of like, without that, you're walking into the Taj, let's say with your energy level at a 5, and you immediately go to an 11, right? If you take time to ground and be intentional about it, you're starting more at a 0 and you're going to a 5. And so that makes the entire experience completely different. It's completely different because it's how your nervous system also reacts to all of that. And so that one little simple thing, and it doesn't have to be going into the Taj, it could be going anywhere, right? You could take that advice and apply it practically anywhere and notice the difference. You'll mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually be in a different place doing something like that versus not doing something like that.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I have my own experience when I was in Rome. It just happened to be, and it was like the worst time, and I didn't even plan ahead. I just happened to, I was visiting various cities in Italy that trip, and the weekend I was in Rome happened to be Easter weekend. So it was like extra packed, not that I was religious, so it just totally didn't even occur to me that was like a thing. And so I went to Vatican City, and honestly, that was one of the most stressful experiences ever, because I was there traveling by myself. I got in line, probably 3 or so hours before close. I barely got in. So it was did I wait in this line and not be able to get in was one stressor. And then when I got in, it was we were being herded like cattle, literally shoulder to shoulder, slowly getting to the Michelangelo, the finger pointing on the ceiling piece, which is the thing that everyone wanted to see. And it was just it was cool to see, but would I ever do it again? Probably not. And the memory that I think about in Italy that was much more enjoyable was literally having dinner by myself with a good, taking my sweet time, enjoying this delicious Italian. I don't even remember the name of the restaurant, but that strikes a much more positive memory than actually seeing the Vatican City. and all of that. So I can relate
Yeah.
to, but if I was in a better grounded state, that could have made the experience a lot different, I could see. But at the same time, I never want to do that again. So that's where. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on, which I think is limiting beliefs people have about travel, is something I had myself, in that I always use like, I don't have time, I don't have money. It's like a constant excuse not to travel. Like I had moved to the East Coast from the West Coast because I was like, oh, I can explore the East Coast more. I never lived there. I can easily travel to Europe. I can easily travel to the Caribbean. And I just didn't, because I was always using those excuses for years. And then it was literally like a breakup that had me be like, why have I not been doing this? Yeah, I keep using these excuses. I'm going to just make it happen. And I was able to travel to Europe to like 4 different countries with $500 in flight. So it's possible. And I think it is a matter of limiting beliefs and getting out of your comfort zone, because it is getting literally outside of your comfort zone, literally. What would you say about that when people are kind of like hesitant about travel?
Yeah. Well, I think it would behoove people to explore, what is it they're hesitant about, right? Is it the cost? Is it the unknown? Is it, different languages? Is it being somewhere new? Is it going by yourself and not knowing anyone, right? There's so many things to explore there. Something that you touched on, which I think is fascinating, is there was a trend a few years ago for perks, right, of working in a corporate environment, where they started to offer unlimited vacation, meaning you could take vacation whenever you want. Most companies have stopped doing that, because what happened is nobody took vacation. So they thought they were solving a problem by telling people you can leave whenever you want, and then people actually not doing it. So many companies have reinstated. A lot of people have said, they will even close their companies at certain times, so it forces people to disconnect, right? Because traveling, whether it's domestic, whether it's in your city, which I also am a huge fan of, traveling in where you live, or whether it's far, right? That idea of disconnecting from our devices, disconnecting from our typical habits, disconnecting from our typical foods, right? That's how we grow. It's how we learn, right? It's how we as humans evolve. And so, I would challenge people to ask yourself, what is restricting you right now? Because there are hacks, right? If it's pricing, for example, right? You found a cheap flight, right? I have credit cards that are used for airlines points, right? So that's a way for me, like I'm spending the money anyway. I might as well get some free flights or free hotels or whatever it is, right? There's ways. You do have to, again, I go back to this word intentional, right? Because you do have to plan for it. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
If you have friends, right? Oftentimes there are people in your circle who want to travel that might be feeling the same way as you. So if you think they'd be good travel partners, you could go together. There's also groups out there that focus, whether it is on solo travelers or whether you want to, go with people on a specific adventure, right? You can search for the location, the type of people, the type of company it is. So there are ways to get around all of this. One thing that was said to me by a client years ago that never even occurred to me, because some of these things I'm kind of like, I'm just going to go. I haven't had too much of that fear. And I was in Thailand with a client, and she said to me, this is the first place I've ever traveled where I can't read the signs, because in Thai script, right, they weren't in English. And I thought to myself, oh, I never even thought of that. And it's because it wasn't on my radar, because I was able to figure it out anyway. And in this day and age, with our smartphone and with Wi-Fi being available everywhere, like Google Maps is a savior when it comes to that stuff, right? Yeah. So it never even occurred to me that would be an issue for somebody. Yet she said to me, I noticed it, but it hasn't been an issue. So I think that is something else that as humans, we're inclined to do regardless of what the issue is like we build up this fear of like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it, or it's going to be too scary, or it's going to push me out of my comfort zone. When really a lot of that is mentally holding us back, and it's not based in reality, right?
Yeah, so that maps pretty well to some of my experience as well, is just not knowing what certain places are going to be like, right? And I haven't been to a ton of places, but for example, I've been to Mexico several times, and some of the areas I've been like, okay, wow, this is really nice and awesome. And other areas I've been like, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if this is the right area for me to be in. So to kind of follow up on what we've been talking about, I'd be curious what kind of ideas or strategies you have for people kind of trying to plan vacations so that they end up in places close to what they want to be. Because I think there's probably a pretty big gap sometimes between things like, hey, I want to go to the Taj Mahal. Cool, I'm just going to show up there. Oh, wait,
Right.
it's absolutely packed and crowded and people are mobbing me and what is happening? So be curious what your thoughts are on that piece.
Well, and I think my answer is the same pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, although I stress it more post-pandemic, which is that because each country has its own rules and laws and things change constantly and they're not always communicated in the best way. My advice is, if you can, work with a travel professional, because 9 times out of 10, the travel professional, you're not going to pay them necessarily more money, right? Because oftentimes travel professionals make their money from the hotels or from the tours or whatever it is, right? It's not like they're upcharging you. So that's one thing I strongly recommend, not just because I'm in this industry, but because during the pandemic, I think a lot of us saw, if we had travel plans that had gotten canceled, or, we were kind of like stranded of like, now what do I do? And if you had flights, for example, and you tried for 4 days to get a refund on your flight, right? Some of those travel professionals were able to either sit on the phone for you or to get those things worked out faster. So in this day and age, we also, time is a commodity, right? That we do put value and price on. And so working with someone who's been to these places before and really understands how you want to travel is just going to make your experience so much better. And it's going to save you a lot of time. And whether that's research or whether that's these fears, right? Because you can always, for someone who's been to wherever you're going, they're the perfect person to ask. Like, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to read the signs. What is that about, right? How do I deal with that? So that is definitely, there's people out there these days that are calling themselves travel coaches, right? Just because of that specifically, because you're not the only one who's had these questions or had these thoughts. That's one thing. The other thing that I would say is, if you are wherever you're going, I always love to try to find something local and then talk to the waiters or the bartenders, or, if I'm going shopping, the people who work in the store, because they're the ones that they live there, right? And they also have their pulse on the ground. So if you go to a bar or restaurant that you love, or if you walk into a store and you love the store, chances are the people who are working there probably have similar tastes and thoughts, right, as to what you like. So that's always great to ask local people, like, where should I go? What should I do? And obviously they'll have a little bit of a different perspective, one, because they're local, but two, the other thing to note is, I know we hear these stories, right? But I really want to stress that the majority of people in the world are good people, and the majority of people in the world want to help you. So most of the time, I personally had, in traveling the world for 20 years, I've never had a bad instance. You have to have your street smarts. You have to, keep your wits about you like that. But most of the time people are good. And so to ask for their advice, and to also know, like, it's not like they're telling you things to cause you harm, right? A lot of them too, especially post-pandemic, they're reliant on tourism for some of their economy. And so they're going to make sure that you're happy and safe, right? That is kind of the priority where that's concerned. So that would be my advice for more practical, right? Of getting over those fears and going somewhere.
Mm. I would say there's like a huge growth opportunity in getting outside of your comfort zone. Like, for example, for me, the idea of traveling by myself internationally was just like, oh, that sounds like very uncomfortable. Who am I going to talk to? But honestly, it was a very liberating experience for me, in that it kind of forced me to talk to the locals and actually be more immersed in the countries. Which was really cool. And then I had joined the Facebook group Girls Love Travel and met some random people to be a travel buddy with, as we did various things together. And it was just such a fun and liberating experience. But on the other side of the going past the discomfort, I could see why maybe Donovan's story about being in Mexico was actually something that happened when me and my brother were in Mexico together. Sort of, I was okay when we were in like a sketch area, which I had no qualms about because I had been to the Dominican Republic, and that was sort of like third world countries, and I was like, it's whatever. And my brother was very uncomfortable initially, and I was like, let's just walk to a restaurant. And he was like, not, let's drive. And I was like, it'll be fine. But gradually over time, he was like, okay, actually, it's okay. People are relatively nice, and it all worked out. So yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, when you're visiting some of these emerging destinations, right, and it's unfamiliar based on what you know and where you operate in your daily world, right? I think, keeping your wits about you, and me as a solo female traveler, right? There's additional concerns that we just have when we're traveling. And so if you can do things like, for me, as much as I try to keep my itinerary open, I also have a plan, and my family, gets my Excel spreadsheets of my trips. They have hotel phone numbers. I always make sure, for me, I try to arrive when it's daylight outside, because things look less scary during the daytime, right? So whether that you're a woman or a family or whatever, that's how it looks. So if you can arrive at your destination in the daytime, so you can get like a lay of the land. If you have hotel reservations for your first night, or even if it's like an Airbnb or a villa, oftentimes everybody has drivers that they employ, and a lot of those people have been vetted, right? And so, it's been a really long time since I just hailed a taxi, right, at an airport for the first time I've ever been to the country, because these are just simple things that you can do to ensure your comfort level and your safety right from the beginning.
Absolutely. That reminds me, when I was in the Dominican Republic, there was a language barrier between me and the Uber driver, but he pulled out his phone and used the app to communicate. And that's how we communicate. I was like, oh, Google Translate is a great tool. If not being able to speak the same language is another barrier potentially.
Yeah, and I really liked that piece of advice, to consult someone who is in the industry. And I don't know how well known it is that a lot of the money comes from booking on the other side of things, not from the person trying to book things. Because I know there have been many instances or questions that I've had before travel that someone who just knew the area or had been there would be able to answer quite easily. I personally had no idea how, I don't know where the money comes from. I haven't gotten someone to help me plan travel before. So I think that's probably going to be one of the most useful things that people can do, is just to contact someone who knows what's going on, because then the likelihood that you end up, even if it's not safety, right, just somewhere that's a tourist trap that's 10 times more expensive than it needs to be, which I definitely did several times in Mexico, is much lower. So I think that's going to be really a good piece of information for people to have, as well as it sounds like there are a lot of groups and other places that you can find individuals who are travel minded. And on that note, I'd be curious if you have seen, are there generally places at high travel destinations that you can contact for more information? So by that, I mean, if there's a particular city that you're trying to go, do most of these cities that have decent sized tourism populations also have like information booths? I'm gonna let you talk, because
they do. It kind of depends. I wouldn't use that as my first option, right? The internet is full of resources. So I would say kind of hang out and get your advice from people who you feel are similar to you, right? Dr. Alice mentioned Girls Love Travel as a Facebook group, which I am also a part of, right? Facebook has tons of groups where it relates to travel, and not only for travel, but for example, Bali pre-pandemic, when the borders were open, was our number one destination. And there are, even within Bali, like the cities in Bali, the cities have their own Facebook groups. So like, get on that Facebook group. You don't have to be a resident, right, to get on that Facebook group, but I'm on that Facebook group and I find out stuff all the time, like great restaurants, bad restaurants, what's happening with COVID rules and testing and, like everything. And it's at such a local level, and it's from the people people who live and operate in that place daily, like that's a great place to start. There's also, because so many people travel these days, obviously Instagram is amazing for travel pictures. So just start to go follow some of the hashtags of the places that you want to visit, because you'll get great advice. Again, you'll have to weed through some of it, right? Unless you're working with a professional that knows all this information, but it's a great place to start. I've happened upon some amazing places just because someone, I had no idea, on the internet, I didn't know them, but they posted these amazing photos and I was like, I want to go see that. And so it gets added to my list. So, the internet is a great resource for all of those things, for sure.
Totally. Yes. That's where I have so many places on my bucket list. I'd love to travel. So is there any other tools or tips that you wanted to offer our audience?
Sure. Yeah. And so, this is coming out at a time where travel soon will be coming back, right? The world will open again. It has been shut down for quite a while. And those of us here in the US who can travel domestically, some of us have, and there's great stuff to explore in our backyards. When I talked about being intentional when it comes to travel and really opening yourself to this concept of health and wellness, one of the things that I created during the pandemic is called the Wander Home series. And basically, the reason that was created is because pre-pandemic, a lot of our clients, we were taking them, as I mentioned, to these places around the world to the root of a lot of these health and wellness practices. So yoga, breath work, sound healing, other kinds of healers, right, that are known outside of the US, some in the US as well, and visiting those practices and incorporating those practices into your travel experience. Since we weren't able to go in this past year internationally very much, we decided that let's bring these practices to people at home. And so that's how the Wander Home series came to be. And it was introducing people to these different modalities so that they could begin to become familiar with them, practice them at home. And that way, when travel reopens, you have that foundation that we talked about, right? That foundation of like, oh, I tried the Wander Home series and I love mindful walking. I can do that in the country that I'm going to go to. Or I tried sound healing and I really understand what that's like. And I know the next time I go to Thailand, I can replicate that experience by going to a temple and hearing monks chant, right? So to weave all that in, and that's also something, one, it's going to make it a little less scarier. And two, it's going to connect you to those practices at an internal level that will be almost replicated in a little bit of a familiarity when you travel to a place that's unknown, and it will help you feel more comfortable, right? And feel pretty grounded and connected to where you're visiting. And so for us during the pandemic, it was important that we really guided people towards that programming, because again, that's programming you can use in your everyday life, but it also will prepare you when it's time to go back out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's those tools are useful just generally in life, but especially when you're traveling, when there's higher uncertainty, when there's higher chance basically of getting in this stress loop. It just gives you a nice, it sounds like you provide a number of tools, but you can pick one and get kind of an off ramp from that, reground yourself, and then make sure that your travels or vacation continues in the way that you want. I wish that I had thought about that before, because there have been plenty of times that I've gotten stuck on that loop of just getting more and more stressed out. But remembering and knowing and having practiced something that you can have control over and get some little piece of mindfulness, some little piece of ownership over your space. If you happen to be feeling all these other things, even if you're not, it's still going to be a nice tool. But I could see how that would really change the entire trajectory of your day or maybe your whole trip.
Yeah.
Totally. Absolutely. Yes. And for anyone in the tuning in, if you're interested, go to wanderhomeseries.com and pravassa.com. Also, those are the same handles on Instagram and any other places they can find you.
We're on Facebook. Yeah, you know, I'm not on TikTok at the moment, but maybe.
I haven't gotten there yet either. Maybe someday, we'll see. Yeah. Awesome. Check that out if you need some support and bringing some travel to your home so you're more prepared to travel when you are ready to get out back into the world. Awesome. Linden, thank you so much for being on our show. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Donovan and Dr. Alice. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.